Today, we must take decisive measures to put an end to Israel's arrogance and its continued perpetration of crimes against humanity under the cover of double standards by the international community. At the outset, I am pleased to welcome you to your second home, Qatar, and to express my sincere thanks and appreciation for your participation in this summit. This emergency Arab-Islamic summit is being held in response to the treacherous Israeli aggression that targeted our lands in broad daylight last Tuesday, which corresponds to the 9th of this September. This act reflects arrogance and recklessness in violating the sovereignty of a member state of the United Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Arab League, and a mediator in the peace process. This constitutes a dangerous escalation that threatens peace, security, and regional stability and undermines all and any efforts to de-escalate in the Middle East region. Israel's persistence in violating international law, human values, and diplomatic norms was manifested in the brutal attack that took place in broad daylight in the city of Doha, in a residential area, an area that includes homes, schools, kindergartens, and diplomatic missions, and which led to the martyrdom of a security officer and caused civilian casualties. This attack can only be described as state terrorism, a method adopted by the current extremist Israeli government. It blatantly disregards international law. It targets the security of the entire region in a flagrant challenge to international legitimacy. Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, the reckless and treacherous Israeli aggression was committed while the state of Qatar was hosting official and public negotiations, with the knowledge of the Israeli side itself, aimed at achieving a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of prisoners and hostages. Instead of appreciating Qatar's efforts and preserving the progress made in the negotiations, Israel carried out an airstrike on a residential building, where members of the Hamas negotiating team were present. This confirms to you that what happened was not merely an attack on a location, but an assault on the very principle of mediation itself, and against all that diplomacy represents as alternatives to war and destruction. Therefore, this aggression will only serve to thwart attempts at de-escalation. It also affirms the intentions of the Israeli government to reject peaceful paths to resolving the Palestinian issue and to continue defying international will and the United Nations Charter. This is evident from the repeated statements of Israeli officials regarding the annexation of Palestinian lands and the illusions of Greater Israel. And perhaps you will agree with me when I say that what encourages Israel to persist in this approach is not just silence, but rather the international community's inability to hold them accountable and the absence of consequences for any crime they commit, esteemed audience. The state of Qatar will not tolerate any breach of its sovereignty or threat to its national security. Qatari sovereignty is an issue that cannot be compromised or overlooked, and we will confront any threat against us by all means guaranteed by international law. In this regard, we appreciate the solidarity of our Arab and Islamic sister countries, as well as friendly countries from the international community, who have condemned this brutal Israeli attack. They have expressed their full support for us and for any legal and legitimate measures we take to preserve our country's sovereignty. The attack on the sovereignty of the state of Qatar constitutes a clear violation of Article 2 of the United Nations Charter, especially paragraph 4, which prohibits the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. It is also a violation of diplomatic custom, as well as ethical and humanitarian standards, and it cannot be considered a mere isolated incident. Rather, it is a dangerous precedent that must be confronted with all strength and determination by our Arab and Islamic countries, and by those who stand for what is right. And I say that the inhumane actions of the Israeli occupation government can only be interpreted as an open message, the content of which is clear: that Israel has no red lines governing its behavior, and that it is determined to destabilize any country in the world and undermine any diplomatic efforts that conflict with its agenda or expose the fragility of its position and the falsehood of its claims. Therefore, we must not remain silent or complacent in the face of this barbaric aggression, and we must take real and tangible measures on all levels to prevent further escalation. If we leave it unchecked, it will not stop at any limit, and we will inevitably find ourselves facing an endless cycle of bloodshed and destruction, with no one spared from its harm and dangers. Distinguished guests, it is time for the international community to stop applying double standards and to hold Israel accountable for all the crimes it has committed. And Israel must know that the ongoing war of extermination against the brotherly Palestinian people, which aims to uproot them from their land and forcibly displace them from their homeland, will not succeed, no matter how many claims are made to justify it, and that these attempts are now well known and rejected by the international community. This is revealed by the Israeli occupation's rejection of the proposed ceasefire in Gaza and its deliberate expansion of the scope of the war, endangering all the peoples of the region, including its own people, putting everyone in an extremely dangerous situation. We reiterate, as we always do, that this region will not enjoy security, peace, and stability, and its peoples will not feel justice unless the brotherly Palestinian people obtain their legitimate rights and establish their independent state on the 1967 borders. We in the state of Qatar affirm that mediation in resolving disputes through peaceful means is not only a legal obligation stipulated by the state's permanent constitution, but also a humanitarian and moral commitment and a deeply rooted principle in our policy. Just, comprehensive, and lasting peace is a strategic choice that is indispensable. From this standpoint, we affirm that the reckless and barbaric Israeli practices will not deter us from continuing our sincere efforts, together with the Arab Republic of Egypt and the United Nations, to stop this unjust war. In conclusion, it is no secret to you that last Thursday we approached the Security Council in an open session to condemn the Israeli aggression against the sovereignty of the state of Qatar. Here, we value the international consensus in condemning Israel, expressing solidarity with the state of Qatar, supporting its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and backing its essential role in mediation. We also reiterate our welcome of the statement issued by the Security Council in this regard. Today, we must take decisive measures to put an end to Israel's arrogance and its continued perpetration of crimes against humanity under the cover of double standards by the international community. Peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings.